7, it impacts students indirectly because that's giving your students.
Teachers.
Yeah, exactly. So.
Okay. Does anyone else have any thoughts or?
Dr. Buckner, could you offer, explain a little bit, because we're prioritizing budget, right? So like what we're doing right now is we're saying, here are our top 2 things. So when you look at your overall budget, if you're on the fence between one thing or the other, if the go team says this is 1, this is 2, then that budget is more likely to move money in that direction.
Yeah, I'd say the priorities influence the budget. But as you'll see, we're pretty handcuffed in what, I mean, we don't have this $13.5 million to do whatever. So it's an influencer, yes, absolutely, whatever we choose. All of these are important, they're all important, but definitely those are influencers we talk to.
So some of these to me have more budgetary implications than others. So like 6 and 7, for example, are, so 7 is like soliciting and acting on teacher input. 6 is valuing teacher time. So when it comes to number 6, like this is something I care about a lot and feel is really, really important for retaining the best staff in the school. But to me, there's like, I don't visualize like, here's the 10 things to spend money on to help address that. And so to make sure I understand the process, if that's something, I'd be less likely to put that as a budget priority because that's something that can be kind of done without thinking about the
Not
budget.
necessarily with money, I mean, huge amounts of money.
Right.
Does anybody have any thoughts on any questions or anything about the, either these strategies or the suggestion of number 7, the priorities that are there? Feel like something else might need to be considered, and if not, then we might consider this a vote so that we can at least set the table.
Go ahead.
Is number four, we're talking about budget. A lot of those positions that are described, I think additions we've made for this year have been, I think, huge value add for our school, particularly on E. And if we were to put this as a priority, it's, I've gotten a lot of feedback from students around more mental health focus, more capacity for social work. I think I've heard a lot of things about counselors having all these new responsibilities and feel like there's, I think, some kind of overwhelming there. If we were to put number 4 as one of the priorities, would that put on the table something like having an additional social worker? Having an additional kind of person that is kind of focusing specifically on mental health at the school? Because Chris 1A, I know, works with a certain section of students directly. And then we have a lot of other things. We have something here like, I think we have a clip, right? That's in SEL efforts, like in the counseling office.
Well, if I can just put this out there, we also have to remember that an awful lot of these strategies are already in place and on some level, right? In a perfect world, we boost every one of them up where we could. I think what's, for me at least, and I'm biased because I'm, a teacher spouse, that I think kind of like Art said is that, the number 1 is to make sure that the kids have the educational opportunities that we're putting forth in number 1. And number 7, or, it could be one of the others, I guess, make sure that the teachers feel valued and are part of that system. I think it's like unfortunately, it's like any business. If you don't take care of the people that work within your building, it's just gonna crumble to some degree. I mean, I agree with you. I don't mean to dismiss at all what you're saying on number 4, but for me, I think especially these past 2 years, maybe the strategies in another year would play out a little differently, but I feel like so much has really come down on teachers and staff and support staff. you need somebody to do it, that would be, you know, at least a step in the right direction.
We also have a psychologist here.
Yeah.
That's it.
Full time?
No.
No.
He's not full.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, here, he's the president of the building, just not every day.
Oh, I see.
I guess I'm wondering, because what I see on number 4 is a lot of things to continue, I'm wondering that like, if we were to prioritize that from a budget standpoint, would that mean adding?
Maybe if we go over the duties and responsibilities as it relates to budget from the whole team and split it up from what the principal does, that might be a little bit more insight as to how you should look at what you're prioritizing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this set of meetings is going to be a multi-step, or it'll take at least 3 meetings in order to finalize and approve the budget. And so the goal, you know, the norm starts to sit there, it has to be public, you know, we'll have places for everybody to speak and contribute and ask questions and ideas. Because we've already done a data review in order to come up with this brand new strategic plan. And it can be ongoing that you can ask for data during this process. Then review the strategic plan, which is the step that we're at. Then you're gonna talk about the budget parameters. And then we'll talk about what the choices are, what it would be as a school or Dr. Bachman allocated certain things to go towards the priorities and rationale for it. So the roles, the principal designs the budget and proposes operational changes that can raise student achievement. They flesh out the strategies, implementation, and management of those things from the school level, focuses on the day-to-day operations of the school, and serves as the expert on the school. And they are hiring quality instructional and support personnel. The role of the goal team is to focus on the big picture. Positions and resources, not people, and to ensure that the budget is aligned with the school's mission and vision, and that resources are allocated to support those key strategic priorities that are trying to determine right now. So when you're picking the two on this next page, oh, this is not. That might have changed. I'm looking for the one with. I got it. 1 second. So the whole point is when you're looking at your priorities right now, you're looking at the ones that you want to use. I'm trying to read and talk at the same time. It's not really working for me. I'll just read it before you show it on my screen.
How did the coffee go? If I may take a break while you search for that. Did the coffee go okay? Did you have a good, is there?
About 100, give or take, you know, during the time. You know, it's in and out. Yeah, that's good.
Any major things that are concerns or just kind of?
Safety, security, cheating, that was about it. I mean, that was the major stuff. We talked about kind of course selection, new courses, things like that, you know.
Yeah.
Always talk about some things. So.
It was good. I went back and watched it after the fact. Because I.
It was so good. I
Yeah.
had to see it
It
twice.
was. I mean, Dr. Bachman's not afraid to just say, this is what's going on. This sort of, you know, like, no, have to shy away from things. I thought it was really good.
That's good. So does that help though?
Like, so yeah, it does help. So I think particularly on, just in general, I saw Nadia's email as well. I really like the framework she provided of like one being something student focused and like what Art is saying about 7. In my mind, I'm between number 6, something I really care about, but to me, for a budget standpoint, I can't visualize like what it means to spend money on priority number 6.
Right.
But so then to me, it comes down, like, I'd be curious, artists, of like your thoughts on 7 versus 8. Because like we already, it says here that we already have a compensated teacher mentor position. And so like for the new nights, you know, that's a role we have, but I feel like perhaps we could have so like these other things here about like people who are stepping up beyond just like on the PLC, maybe like within the department or across grade levels, like trying out new initiatives, if there are other possible pathways for teachers being compensated for things like that, if that were to be a budget priority. So I'm kind of between 7 and 8.
Yeah. I mean, with 8, in the perfect world, anytime outside of 8:30 to 3:45, I would want to be compensated. Like that's in the perfect world, because it's my contracted hours. However, I mean, we all know that's just not, that's not the name of the game. And I hate that it has to be that way. It sucks and it shouldn't have to be that way. And then you start getting into, well, what positions are we actually talking about? Because I know when I taught it young, we had these, what were they called, master teacher leaders. We had those. And those are helpful. I think here at Midtown, I don't really know if we have a need for that because our staff is really well seasoned. I think if we, and I mentioned this in a couple of meetings ago, I think if we started, when you start getting into bringing in the younger staff, the staff that didn't have as much experience, that's when you need a little bit more of that guidance and things like that. But I just, for me, I see like, in terms of teachers, they can teach, like they've been doing it for a long time. Of course, everybody needs new tricks. You're never too old to stop learning, but in terms of the leadership opportunities, that needs to be very specific as to what they are going to be doing. And what is necessary for them to do, you know, in terms of that. And what's that person's goal? Is it just to, you know, lead their team, or are they trying to go into further administration? I think that's what it is too. I do see a need for that if we're thinking about fostering folks up into further administration, but just for having a bunch of more like department heads, I don't really see a need for that. But that's just my opinion. Which is why I would prioritize it.
Yeah.
I would agree. I was looking at the wording for number 7, and how it says just to act on teacher input. Personally, well, I don't know, but personally, I don't see how you could spend money on that other than just increasing like the solicitation, like asking the teacher input. So I don't really think that should be the priority for the budget, because you don't really need to spend money on getting input from staff, rather than providing a mechanism we can pay and buy a mechanism.
Well, I think also you need to remember that we need to look at the strategies that are attached from A through H, because that's really the, you know, that's going to be the mechanism that's going to move the dollar. Yeah.
I mean, where you're gonna spend money on number 7 is paying for people's professional development. I mean, we're talking about that. I mean, that's one of the biggest things, going to conferences, especially if they're not in-state, you know, that would be something, which I mean, I wholeheartedly like that. Professional development has a very special place in my heart. So I think that's why, because it, like I said, that indirectly affects students. If you're not collaborating outside your building, I know people that have never been to like a conference, never been to any professional development. I'm like, how? It should almost be mandatory, in my opinion, to do it outside of, I mean, I guess we do have, of course, within district, but when you're talking about, that's strictly APS. You need to get outside of your own outside of your own box, so to speak, so. That's why I think number seven is really important. to me.
Well, and one thing I would say is that sometimes we can look at these in a limited way, but even things like continuing soliciting input for teachers to fill instructional resources and supplemental resources. Some of these things, they could also end up being organized outside of the school day or somehow, allowing, maybe there is either a funding mechanism or, a gathering that where money is spent on, food,
I think-
that everybody can work out those things in a more, reasonable way than just trying to jam stuff down.
Yeah, I mean, I think other than, another way it affects budget is say, for instance, I want to go observe one of my colleagues teaching. We're gonna need a setup for that. That stuff has to be paid, yada, 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 stuff like that. So, that's another way. I mean, it's not like flying somewhere, getting a hotel, but it's also, that has to be paid for. So.
Yeah.
I think that's important.
Kyle?
Just going back to the soliciting input from teachers, that input may turn into, like, when it says fill instructional resources, they may guide whatever that input was with some type of book study or new curriculum that they would like to implement in their classroom, which is then going to be tied to funds.
Be a line item at some point.
It would be, it would create a line item.
Are there any other questions or concerns? Otherwise, I'd like to bring this to a vote that we can do it either individually or we can do them as a package and say that we agree as a go team that number 1 and number 7 would be the priorities that we would put as the top 2 for this year.
I feel like I'm ready to vote on number 1, but if others would like to share on 7 or 8.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and vote on number 1 then?
Yeah.
We'll do them as separate. So all those in favor of number 1 being chosen as one of the 2 priorities, top priorities, raise your hand. All those opposed? All right, passes. Number 1 is in there. All right, so
Kim, I have a question. Do they have to pass unanimously? Or is it
that
just?
is a very good question, but I think what we just proved is that it passed, and so we will.
So can we bring 7 up and 8 up for a vote? And whichever one has the highest vote then?
We can definitely take that road. I guess let's start first. Chris is still unsure. How many other people are unsure of how they would want to vote or have questions about this? Because if it is just Mr. Rodon, or, yeah, go ahead.
I think I'm leaning towards 7, now that I've heard everyone talk about the 2, but I still kind of have a little confusion, I think.
Okay, your confusion is in what way?
So it's like saying, number 8 is saying to provide a mechanism to increase leadership. And then number 7 is talking about, I guess, if it's budget, talking about funding professional development. So what's like the distinct difference between those 2?
Well, I think you need to take all that into, if I may, you need to see it's professional development, instructional resources, communication, and collegiality. So in theory, that takes a pretty broad picture of what we're talking about. Whereas number 8 focuses a little more targeted, it seems to me, on how to increase teacher leadership and opportunity there. So unless I'm seeing it differently than Chris, you tell me. And I think also you need to keep in mind, and you guys, you teachers would know way better than I would for sure, what you feel the temperature of the staff and the support would be there, and where their hearts would be more leaning. If you have any thoughts in that way, like I said, I can only speak to what I hear from the middle school teachers' minds. So, but if you have anything that you think is directly going to influence anybody or push this one way or the other, or maybe have, her see what things might be better, well, go ahead, Martin.
Well, I think one like slightly covers what's in 7, just because it like focuses more on the curriculum section of things. But 8 is more focused on like increasing the leadership of teachers, plus not having them leave soon after, and like just keeping them as soon as for as long as possible. So it's just like what would be most important between those two.
I think Artis makes a great point around like I think we're trying to get at making teachers feel authentically valued, and particularly this year. And so I think there's kind of a way of, if teachers want to be able to travel, want to be able to go to and like feel comfortable to continue their learning in their own way. Then I think I totally see the way that would be a way we could be spending money. Like I was thinking about something for myself of like the way I think about developing of like I'm spending money on like books and magazines and things on my own to like develop as a social studies teacher. And I'm sure there's a lot of music stuff for you. And it's just, and so like I can envision a lot of ways money would be spent on 7. Frankly, you could perhaps on 7 get to a place of if we are thinking about some of these collaboration opportunities, if that means it's a regular responsibility, then perhaps paying a teacher to oversee something like that would be, or having a group of teachers that help kind of collectivize and then voice concerns, and something like that might have some sort of compensation for additional time. So I'm seeing some ways that 8 could fit into 7.
Yeah, I mean, also, just thinking your professional memberships, I think, is every teacher a member of some sort of professional membership, outside of page, of course, but like, what's your, and I don't even know if this is true, like, do you have a professional membership for social studies? Like, is there a national social
There
studies?
is.
Yeah, so like, everybody should be a
And
part.
we traditionally given that, we're delayed this year in producing that. This is the first year that we have extended those professional organizations to arts
Mhm.
and PE. Because who knew there was one for
Yeah.
PE? So I guess my concern about the discussion is maybe steering away from, are you gonna compensate? Are you gonna compensate? Because there are other factors outside of this table that influences those decisions, whether or not the district has said titles with compensation tied to it, and if those titles that have compensation, would those people feel value with the amount that's given? Because it might just be $150 for all that time and work expended, and that's not something that we at this table would be able to change.
Right.
Versus professional development, we did in the past sponsor people to go to the National Science Teachers Conference. So science, social studies, we did all of those prior to COVID. So it's trying to figure out how to safely navigate within the confines of travel restrictions back into that space, because we did allocate, and boy, you was on the committee last year, funds for travel, but can you travel?
Yeah.
So it's not that it's not allocated or the school isn't putting focus on that. And then I want to also point out some of the things is about exposure. So some of these opportunities that we're asking for leadership might not be local. It might be all the emails that you get from district to serve in these said leadership capacities as teacher leaders. Are we utilizing those spaces because they do request for people from every school to go and serve? So just some thoughts around that.
Yeah,
I would say that the difference between the 7 and 8, a lot of what you just said, but 8 is focusing on increasing leadership. And to me, in order to do that, you're going to need the professional development, instructional resources. So you're going to need all of those tools in order to translate into being an effective leader, to be able to mentor someone else. So if you don't have those things, then you're at a slight disadvantage. So for me, I would think that concentrating on, because in a sense, part of that 8 is in that 7, you're building, you're fostering that leader by doing the professional development, providing them with extra instructional resources, communication, the collegiality. So you're fostering your leader in a sense in that number 7, because if you don't have those things, it's going to be virtually impossible to facilitate having effective teacher leaders. Because if you've skipped all of those steps, then the potential of you being burnt out comes even quicker, but at that point, because you don't have the resources to get through what you need to do. So that's kind of how I'm looking at the 2 of them, if that makes sense.
And if it helps, your goal in identifying the 2 isn't to say you're not going to spend money on the other 9.
Right.
The goal is for you to place those as your emphasis and to link it to one of the SMART goals at the top, a SMART goal. You will have an opportunity to evaluate how the school is progressing towards the priorities at the end of every year anyway, on all of them. So just because it's not number 1 and 2 doesn't mean it doesn't have emphasis or importance for the effectiveness of, the school culture and the academic program, right? So it's just, what is your goal? What are those 2 top things, and what SMART goal are you gonna link those things to, so that when Dr. Lockton gets ready to think about how she's flushing out her budget, where she's going to show you that that's taking place.
And anybody that's been on Go Team before knows that, we're not talking about, again, $13 million that we can spend. I think I think when we get to that, you'll see that, for instance, it's $4,500 more this year per teacher in our budget. So whereas teachers last year were $89,000, they're $93,500. Times 90 teachers here,
97.
right, times 97, that's what, $400,000, $500,000 more. I think we have to be really realistic. And also about the district, we're just talking about professional development, as Ms. Hollis said, about the district expectations, okay? We are part of this public school system, that has a very clear mission and very clear strategic plan of their own. So, while I'm not being flippant, but while I would love to go to a 4-day conference on mindfulness, maybe that can fit into the whole child's APS 5, but I'm just not sure that, we have to be realistic. Okay? And I'll say, I've been trying to get a professional development plan from our team leaders for 3 months. I haven't gotten that, so there's nuts and bolts, there's nuts and bolts things we have to do before we even talk about, which is normal, that's normal, but, like professional development, really, what do we want to develop our teachers on? What do we want to develop our counselors on, that kind of thing? We have to have some discussions about that, but it's not just going to a conference out of town because that's what you want to do, It's just, we are in a public school system that is very directed right now. We do not have the autonomy we used to have. That's just the way it is. They're very focused on, equity, data management. I mean, the APS 5 is what we're doing. It is. So I think when we get into budget, we'll see a little bit more about, about that. Anyway, we can get this down now. We got to nail this down. I can't remember all of that.
And to your point earlier about that other question, the fact that if we see the value in the positions that were added this year, that means we have to account for it in the budget for next year in order to keep, attaining those pluses that we gained and hopefully get more.
Okay, so, if I can somebody make the motion that we vote on number 7?
A motion that we vote on strategic priority number 7.
Okay.
As our second budget priority.
All right, all those in favor? All those opposed? All right, it passes. So we've got number 1 and number 7, Dr. Rockman, too.
That's what we'll put in our plan,
There you go.
our budget plan.
That'll make things so much easier now, won't it? I mean, that was just gonna roll.
Right. Oh, yeah,
So as we're looking at that, if you can look at your priorities, I would say that number 1, your SMART goals, that's at the top. That number 1 would match well with the first SMART goal.
Graduation rates. Yeah.
Mhm.
And then number 7 would align with number 3.
It does, but that's not a SMART goal.
Not-
It's not written as a
Right.
SMART goal.
Right.
So, we're not gonna do that work today.
Okay.
But if we choose 3 to be very important SMART goal, then we have to set 3 right up to where it is.
Okay.
I mean, that's fine.
So do we have to align today the 2 priorities to the SMART goals? Or is that something?
In order for me to give you a full presentation, we gotta know the SMART goal, if the work is not gonna be done right now, like it just delays the next with the rationale. I can definitely move forward with the first one.
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead with the first one. We just need to rewrite that to where it's attainable,
Measurable, timely.
measurable, attainable, timely.
Can you do number 1 and we can, and then we'll worry about it.
And so the next pages are just the strategic plan that you all have voted on and agreed upon. And I just broke it down using the same template, but the first 2 portions are on 1 page, just to make it a little bit more visually appealing and still hard to read. Best I can do without putting anything on a separate page. And so, like I said, you've chosen 1 and 7. And so I add those in with the SMART goal that goes with number 1, and then we will keep TBD for the SMART goal that goes with number 7 until you all flesh that out more. And then from there, we'll be able to match the rationale as to why we're making that as a school priority. And then we wanted to get to the executive summary today. Did you want to?
Okay, this budget represents an investment plan for our school students. and communities. The budget recommendations are tied directly to the school's strategic vision and direction. The proposed budget for the general operations of the school are reflected at 13,306,684. So you see that is the number for this year, for midterm. This investment plan for FY23 accommodates the student population as projected to be 1,591 students, which is an increase of 1 student from last year. Most schools that are cluster are going down have decreased projection. We are, if you paid attention to anything going on last week, we are projected to have almost 2,000 by 2026. That's a discussion for another day.
Actually, Wednesday.
All right, so this is the high level budget allocations for the year. Let me just look at that for a minute. You can see our projections, the count 469 in ninth grade, 430 in 10th grade, 347. Large ninth grade class.
Anyway, we
We
can
had a very
assume that
large
just a
ninth
little
grade
bit.
past year as well. 450. And, the projection was pretty spot on. with the cake. Which would mean if you go by the projection, about 900 students will be in 9th and 10th grade this year. That's a lot. That's a lot of money.
Right. Sounds painful.
Are we able to zoom just a little bit? If that's possible?
Could we have access to these beyond the meeting today? Or, this is interesting, like, is this posted somewhere, this right here?
No, it is not posted anymore.
Okay,
This is the first.
first year, okay. All the weights are set by the district, right? The count is estimated by the
Everything is
district.
set by the.
Yeah, Joe,
No control on that page for the next page.
Right.
Only thing we control is how we allocate what's been given, and some allocations, we don't control that either.
What's the distinction of concentration of poverty versus poverty?
If you are a school that has a large amount of poverty, like the concentration of poverty in your school is larger than the concentration, like you have a large critical mass of poverty at your school versus another school.
The poverty is per student, the concentration is higher.
Is that total? So
Yeah.
if our school had a much higher percentage of students in poverty, that weight would be increased?
The weight's not gonna change.
The weight
No,
just
well,
changes.
it's multiplied versus-
It's just the math.
It's a math.
Okay.
The allocation is the math based on the weight and the amount allocated.
And this is just a question. What tool do they use to measure that? Like, how do they measure that? Because I know we're not Title I and we lost that several years ago, but like, how do they know? like,
Poverty is strictly direct certification, with,
like, services, TANF,
Food stamps.
food stamps, people that are.
direct certification.
People that's what direct certification is.
And do they pull that information from the state, or is that information volunteered per family?
Is pulled from the state.
Yeah, because, they have to.
You can't volunteer information for direct certification. They're not gonna go by what you tell them.
That's what I was talking about.
That's free and reduced lunch. And I'm not sure who volunteers to sit on the budget committee from where they talk about the SSF and all that.
So in all schools, K to 12, the basic base per pupil is the same, 4,506. It's when, the other categories, special ed, a little bit more.
So the expect this year are increasing ninth graders, almost 500.
Yes,
And then it maintains, the 10th grade maintains almost over 400 as well. Because
it doesn't maintain, they do account for loss. So if you look at the number of ninth graders currently, we have more than 430.
and then in 10th grade, it dropped 100 and then keep.
So that
So
was a
this
lot of,
year-
there was a boost this past year in rising ninth grade. We've never hit before since I've been 459 graders entering. Normally it's around 385, 400. So it's not, if you look at the junior and senior class, it's not that they dropped out 500, it's that we didn't have 450 come in to begin with. We normally were around 380 to 400. This year is the first year where we.
Even more. Oh,
So
wow.
these numbers are probably tracked up. I mean, there'll be some fall off every year, but they'll overall.
We won't
yeah,
graduate
yeah,
469.
Right, but they will track up every year probably.
Yes. Yes, but what I have noticed is cyclicality. So like For so many years, it'll track up, and then you'll have a class that kind of drop off a little less than the other preceding classes, and then it'll go back up. So we don't really control the numbers that they put on here. I'm sure they have a lot of formulas associated with that. When we tried to argue it during COVID, they proved us to be wrong because their numbers were closer than ours. So we'll go with what they say. But I will say the numbers, if we're looking at the numbers like per category, let's talk about like special ed or gifted, that doesn't necessarily represent the numbers that's physically in the building. They do use last year data for that, and it is the data that is given from the state at the last census, when the thing we do in October and March. Yes. So
What is EIP, EIP/REP?
EIP is elementary, REP is what we have on high school level, and that is for like student remedial educational programs, so anyone support. And is calculated based on, like I said, FTE, so the numbers that are in support currently at the last time they took that FTE count.
And then the gifted supplement.
We don't have, that's for, if you're a small school.
You don't have large numbers of FTE.
Oh, I see.
So because our gifted, we have large amount, we don't get the supplement that allows for schools that don't have as many gifted students to still receive funds. For the fact that they need a gifted teacher. Any other questions on this? Someone?
But that's how we get our money.
Thank you.
So as you see, that gives us, well, the allocation per student, just because you're a student here, gave us the 7 million. Then if you add up all the extra stuff, we get to the 9 million. Then these are the other places where we also receive funding.
What's the
Get to
summer?
13. Summer Bridge is what you do for transition from 8th to 9th. And yes, that is $2,945 for 460. Yes, that is.
So that's.
How much chalk
You
and
get like one
blackboards do
month
you get?
Maybe some chips.
Hollis, what is the first one? It's a glare, I can't see. it.
Signature programming, 325,000.
That's what I thought.
There are 3 tiers to signature programming, and we were just in the 3rd tier from previous years with college and career. I think it's a great thing that they left us in the 3rd tier because they could have dropped us back down until we figure out what we're gonna pick as a signature program. So we're gonna just leave that 325 alone and be quiet. But that is a max that they will give you currently for a signature program.
But for instance, we know that we'll have to hire a full-time signature program specialist. So that'll be $100,000 out right there. All schools have to, we have to, whatever it is, we have to hire a full-time coordinator.
How are the district funded stipends decided? Is that based on the number of teachers we have at a high school
That's
staff?
nothing to do with teachers. That is all about athletics and department chairs.
So is that fixed though, based on what we like pre-apply as? Basically, like, is there surplus money there ever, or is that like exactly?
It's specific to certain positions.
Yeah.
And it's-
There's no such thing as surplus money.
Right.
No, like this, when you go in the compensation part of the website, and it says, and it goes down to supplemental duties, every person, so like, all fine arts, band directors, chorus teachers, orchestra teachers, receive
Right.
stipends, all athletic coaches, and it's like a set number.
But like, what
That
happens
hasn't moved
when like,
recently, but
when like the football team, we don't have a head varsity football coach anymore, we already allocated 194.
So we did not allocate. The
The district
district
does allocate.
allocated,
So then
so
what
it
happens?
is technically the district's money.
So it doesn't.
So we
expect-
don't have, it's not a plus or minus you're not using it. We're
That's
not,
our max, but we don't get a surplus.
yeah, you don't get it back if you don't use it. They don't let you say, oh, use it somewhere else. That is still.
We can get rid of our
tied to
music programs so that we can use this money for.
It's still tied to athletics, so the athletic department for the district reallocates that money to athletics in some other capacity.
Because there are some ambiguous ones on there, obviously like band directors, things, but there's like club sponsors, like something on there. There's things that are, where it's not clearly delineated, like this is exactly what this school gets. This
The district doesn't give you any money for club sponsors.
No,
The
we would
school
have
can
to-
allocate, and so you're taking away from, let's say, you wanted the summer bridge to have more money since you have 469 students. So when you say, I want this extra money to go towards summer bridge, then that means it's not going
Towards
towards
summer
club
help.
sponsors. If you wanted to go to club sponsors, then it can't go to summer bridge. You have this bucket of money that you can parse, and how you parse is the principal's decision. But if you, is where, that's why you pick the priority, define where would the vote team as the spokespeople for community or parents or whatever, and this is where you feel the money should go towards. And as our
You know,
president
I mean,
said,
at Midtown, we have 55 clubs. And who, how do you decide who gets this? Who gets paid for the supplement for that or?
Yeah, and they're battles, that's
You know,
how
I mean,
you
that's
do
a
it.
real difficult, that would be a real difficult thing to do.
and especially since clubs, any child can come to a teacher and say, I want this club, and don't look and see if this club is, this idea is already being, you know, addressed in another club. You go ahead and you say you want it, the other can say, okay, you can have it, and then when you say, well, everyone's getting the same stipend for that position, you have no way of saying, well, you really didn't have any meetings, you're not gonna get your stipend. You've already allocated that in the budget, we've already given that name out to the district, that person's getting the money, even if you had 20 meetings and Mr. Boyd had one.
And I had
You know?
one, I had one person in my club and you had 100.
Right.
You can see what a nightmare that would be for moms. I mean, that's just-
It's no way to measure the equity in it, so, I mean, it's just, clubs have never really,
Oh, yeah.
you can't really pay the sponsors of clubs because no one have too many, just, it's too much of a runaround, so that's why it's limited to fine arts, athletics, and, you know, department chairs, things like that.
And like yearbook,
Mhm.
Newspaper,
newspaper,
Yeah.
and there's a quiz bowl, that's a small, very small stipend, nothing big.
Right.
Work is got like 10,000, very small. I mean, there are some things that are just, that the options the district has. You know, of kind of facility management, you know, so it's just, again, I tell you, our hands are tied.
How do they determine the field trip transportation? You don't, I
it's
mean,
per people.
oh, is it just a number? Because then you've got to figure out how to minimize the number of field trips to hit that
Well,
number.
And then right now, with the cover
Makes it easy.
you're really not hitting it, right?
Right.
But there used to be a time when this lovely media center, every book was, you know, you tell the district, this is what I want, and they'll say, oh, we'll get you the book. Any additional book that we put on this shelf is coming out of this budget. There is no budget, no, it's coming out of the
Oh.
13 million.
Right.
There is no additional place to get
I got
anything. So that's where we were gonna end today, because of course, nothing has been allocated, that's why you still see it. And we haven't done
Right,
anything
but
yet.
you can, you can see you know.
Yeah.
Some of the,
The fun stuff that you get to do, right? You don't let us do.
yeah. So about, right, 40, almost 5,000 for instruction, like a good example is, you know, 28.5 teachers, almost 29 teachers. This is almost $5 million out of that budget as a sample. The huge majority goes to salaries. That's like 75% of every school.
right, so we'll be up here to the next meeting.
Okay.
Mhm.
And so between now and then, we need to align what our SMART goals
We just need
Or
the
third.
SMART goal
for this
seven.
one thing and the second.
The first one goes along with
The first one, we're good. The third one, and I was asking Dr. Buckman before, maybe you guys have some thoughts or some creative ideas, because obviously you want to try to, how do you quantify, right? How do you rate it? And, possibly we could use the Gallup survey that's done every year. You have to just determine what the number range would be or whatever the growth mark would be.
And I think it's twice a year, if I'm not mistaken, at the beginning of the year.
That's how they do it.
Or like to see the growth of
the
it,
Gallup.
yeah, so the just.
Maybe they talked about that. Usually it's like a November.
So it's year to year.
But how would we, do you have any suggestions how, I don't know what that Gallup survey looks like. I'm guessing you guys know more, staff does. But,
It's 10 questions.
12 questions.
but how would we be able to put some kind of measurable factor on here? is what I'm wondering.
We can get you the list of questions. I think she said she's sending you the data, and
Okay.
each question has the school's data and the district's answers.
Okay.
And when it says the district answers, it's K-12 in that answer, and elementary tends to be a little nicer.
And I'm also, I'm not sure that the results this year are quite as reliable and valid as they have been in years past, because a number of people, not just in this school, kind of answered the questions based on their feelings about the district.
Yeah.
And it's really just supposed to be about the school, and there's just a little bit of animosity to the district, so that translates into animosity at school level, so. But we're gonna go with, we're
But there
It
is
was
no,
complicated.
it's the, but that's also what they call the school climate. Am I correct? Or is that?
Oh, that's a whole
more about
Final
something
is
else?
the state.
Okay,
that's just different survey.
okay.
But the 12 questions, one of them is, do I have the best friend at work?
Right.
Has someone given me feedback in the last 7 days? And I'm paraphrasing.
Oh, yeah.
Do I think my voice is being heard, or,
Right.
Okay. So that's why she's saying it was hard to answer, because if I
Yeah.
ask, do I think my voice is being heard? If I put in a request that we may have had to deny because the district really denied it.
Right.
then
Right.
Is it that, the school didn't hear it, or?
Right, well, some of the questions are so subjective to begin with,
Uh,
so not everybody's on the same scale, so
Mhm.
that complicates things, and then, just it's not a clear cut, this is a Midtown thing and this is a district thing, so that complicates things.
But you don't have internally, there's nothing, or there hasn't been in the past, any measure here that can use specifically. You know what I mean?
Like a survey, like a needs assessment, I would
Yeah.
want it to become a needs assessment type of thing,
Yeah.
so that, then if 10 people felt like on the same question about what they needed, something in that way, and that's how we could kind of make some decisions.
And we do a needs assessment on specifically professional development, not if I need professional development. If I need or something. Absolutely. But do you need it or don't you?
Okay.
Are we possibly able to come up with that at the next meeting or between now and the next meeting, that their SMART goal?
That's what I'm trying to get to. I'm trying to find out where the touch points are here that we can actually
I
find.
know that where teachers are gonna, we are gonna get together and talk a little bit about their Gallup data when we go take a look at that, so. I'm happy to be a part of between now and the next meeting, hopefully come up with this. SMART goal.
Well, I guess my question is, you probably want to ask Diane if that's something that has to be worked out. For the public view, or can it be a closed session?
Well,
No, the SMART goal.
yeah, what we would still do this here is just if somebody can bring us the resource so we can talk about it in the open forum. That's all we're saying. So, or anything that can be provided by the school so that, when we do meet, we've got something.
You say and
Yeah.
ask them something.
Yeah, I think it's just. Yeah, okay. So that's your presentation, that's, is that also your principal's report?
That's it.
Everything's going okay, school's open. So,
COVID, lots of, COVID work.
the testing.
So boy, I can send you the first, however many pages that was not that.
Okay.
or PowerPoint, if you want to see that.
Okay, thank you. Are there any announcements?
We met as a cluster advisory team, so I just kind of wanted to hit on those
Please.
really quickly. They talked about signature programming. The district did come back. I did voice the concerns of having other options and what other things were out there. They did come back with either IB or STEM STEAM. My understanding is that it will have to kind of look at Midtown as a whole and kind of talk about the pros and cons for each and what would fit within the climate here as it relates to the cluster as a whole, and also take into consideration Centennial is also a part of our cluster, and they feed into Midtown High School, and they are currently working on their STEAM certification. So just kind of that information was shared with us. So I want to make sure that I give you guys that information as well. They said that they would start kind of rolling out information to the community at large here soon, and having some I don't know, feedback sessions. Yes, I guess is the word I was looking for. Feedback sessions on the options and what they would look like, and also setting up some observations where cluster members would be able to possibly go and observe in a STEM school or an IB school and be able to kind of talk to the professionals there and ask them questions about both of those programming. The other big thing, was it anything else with STEM or IB? I mean, that was basically the nuts and bolts of it. It was a lot of discussion around it, but to hit the high points, those are the high points. We're going to need to pick one of those and kind of have some discussions as a team. The next thing they talked about was the facilities master planning. Most of you probably got or should have gotten the email that said that they were pausing the 4-5 conversation, and they were kind of look at the facilities master planning, which they had, I think it was last Thursday, because I think our meeting was like Wednesday. And so they rolled out the facilities master planning data that they received from Sizemore. And it wasn't anything for me, and I've been looking at the data for a long time. And it wasn't new news to me. Everything that I thought was what they found, which was Hope Hill and Mary Lynn's enrollment was not going up. It was actually, I think it decreased some, and Springdale Park and Morningside's enrollment is going up. They also talked about Midtown's enrollment going up, which we've all been kind of screaming with our eyes, bulging out. So those things were not surprises for me. Some others it may have been. Right now, they're looking at the facilities master planning to determine what they do as a district to come up with some type of plan. Do I know if they're going to do anything here? I don't know. Do I think so? Probably not. They just did a renovation. Just saying, I don't know. The elementary schools, who knows? I think right now, I think they are really taking that pause to try to get this right. So they'll have, I think there's a feedback session or something tomorrow. Is it tomorrow or Wednesday, or it's tomorrow? Okay, I was gonna say, I got the alert. There is a feedback session tomorrow. I think they'll probably go over some data and that they went over at the board meeting. But for right now, there's just a pause. It's not saying that they're not going to do it, and it's not saying that they are going to do it, or they're going to pick a new, K-5 or whatever. I think they're just really trying to digest the information, and hopefully they're, wanting to really get it right with the information given. And it was a lot of data in the slides that they presented, but that's kind of where they're at. So it's on pause. And they also said that Springdale Park would continue using the annex, which was their K center at the church, and Morningside would continue in the old Inman building for another year, even though their building will be ready. And my understanding was that even though that building is ready, it was built and prepared for a particular number of students, minus the students that would have come out through whatever change of moving the kids. And since they're not moving any kids, everybody is going to have to fit, and they're not going to fit in that building. So that building was constructed to fit a certain number of kids. Another thing that they pointed out in that facilities master planning on, I think that was like last Thursday or Friday, they pointed out that the schools currently aren't at capacity. And Dr. Bachman, you can chime in if I get this wrong, but my understanding was that they're not at capacity. A lot of principals are saying that they are, but it's the building utilization and how they're utilizing the building, meaning, where you have regular homeroom teachers that have classrooms, and then you got, this person may be using it, a room for an office, or you may have a gifted teacher that has her own classroom, and a EI teacher that has her own classroom. So the way that they're utilizing their buildings may seem as if, they don't have any more rooms, but it wasn't designed for all of the extra stuff, which is unfortunate, because with budgeting and moving to signature programs and things of that nature, you do need extra rooms for extra stuff. So that was my take on it, but
Did they talk any about rezoning or redistricting any of those elementary schools at all? Is that like?
they did talk about that, but they did not say that that was going to happen. They just said that could be possible down the line, maybe. They don't know. However, if it's a new K-5, you're going to have to rezone for kids to be zoned for that building. But if it's a 4-5, then it's no rezoning at all. You just take everybody's 4th and 5th graders. But if it's a new K-5, then you would have to rezone. But my understanding from looking at the timeline that they sent on Friday, from June to about September, they're going to have some feedback sessions. And I think in June, it was June, and I can't remember the other month, but it's like a final cut for bringing their information to the board. And then there's another like round 2. This is the final, bringing it to the board.
Did they adjust the data for changes due to COVID, like the loss of students that did not?
They did. They did. They talked about it some. I think that if I remember correctly, they said the trajectory was about the same. And I think it was at kindergarten. I don't know if you remember.
Some of the
Elementary schools.
For next year, projected to have less of.
Yeah.
And eventually it will get back up to less of home. So our elementaries are kind of struggling with budget cut. For
Yeah,
sure.
so they said over time, it will get back to what it was. But right now, the trajectory is kind of flatline.
Are you, Kyler, did I hear you right that they're saying that basically, I heard Morningside was going to stay in the Inman property, but that's due to a capacity issue? And so in essence, by not making this decision on what to do with it, they're just keeping it there and rolling another year.
Well, they would have to, because they wouldn't have the space if all of them, right.
Yeah.
Mhm. They wouldn't have the space.
I was wondering, because I was.
So they renovated the school and
Yep.
didn't account for the number of students, like they just
No.
What did they do to the school? Did they add another building or did they?
They added more rooms. I don't know if it was another building.
There is
Is it a building? Okay, so if they added another building with more rooms, however, my understanding, they accounted for the grade levels that were going to be possibly moved out.
They
So let's-
accommodated for immense use.
Correct.
after Morningside left, which would have been either a K-5 or 4-5. But because of COVID, the decision kept getting delayed as to how you were going to utilize Inman. And so the decision was already made to do Morningside at that data based on the facilities planning meeting that they had 5 years ago, right? But that data, at that time, they thought, who knew COVID was gonna happen, that you would be able to split and have Inman in use. And so you would be able to use both starting next year.
So they had already talked about M being a 4-5.
Or,
Right.
Or just the elementary,
Or just another elementary school.
correct. So there was probably, I don't know, let's say 200 kids. Either way you split it, whether that's a 4-5 or whether that's a K-5. Let's say you have about 200 kids that would have come out of Morningside because it would have been rezoned. So they took that 200 kids out because they said, okay, well, we're gonna be using the Inman building for whatever, for elementary school. And then Morningside would be able to go back to their regular school. And
now it's not.
now it's not. So they all have to stay at Inman another
So
year.
it's too many kids to go back to Morningside and not enough
Correct.
kids to split it.
Well, there's enough.
There's
You just have
enough.
to make the decision. that
You
you're
have to
gonna
make a
do it. And
decision.
they're not making that decision.
Yeah,
Agreed
They're
to
pausing.
Let me
this.
rephrase that. They made the
right.
decision.
Yeah, you have to. So basically it comes down to, and no decision was made. And because no decision was made, we are here. And they're going to have to stay in that building because they cannot fit in the other.
And this has been an argument going on for 4 years.
Yeah.
Right.
Decision.
So that's about it, right?
So we made a decision
Did
about
I
the
get it?
decision. We made a
Exactly.
decision about the decision.
That's about it. That's all I got.
We're close to the end here. So we have the recognition of visitors. Can we get your names for our wonderful secondary Morgan?
Sure, I'm Jennifer Keenan. I have a 9th grade daughter here and I'm on the Howard Go team.
I'm Carolyn Faulkner, I have a 9th grade here, and I'm on
And Jennifer, did I read somewhere recently that you're working with the mayor on the education committee?
Yes, yes, I was named the chair of the Education and Youth Subcommittee of this transition team.
Nice, congrats.
Carolyn, could you repeat your last name?
Thank you. GH.
I really, Jennifer, look forward to working with the mayor's office and the education office, just a lot of stuff.
Yes.
I mean,
Talk about
violence
it.
reduction, crime, working with kids in middle and high school,
Yeah.
how to prevent them from making bad choices, criminal bad choices.
Is there any comment though that you felt like making or wanted us to record?
Oh, no, I just wanted to observe. We're
Okay.
going to be doing the same thing at Howard tomorrow, so it's also
Lucky
helpful to
you.
get a preview of your process, so thank you.
Sure. All right, well, then that concludes all the business unless someone